Hey all, welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Plate. Talking with today's guest felt exactly like what it was, that of which was catching up with an old friend. Bob Bean Craig and I kicked out many miles together back in the day, and his energy then continues to be what it is now, intriguing, settling, and open. In today's conversation, I think you will hear what I mean. Listen in as we talk about reinventing yourself, opening up to accept who you are, reminding ourselves that it's okay to not know what you're doing, and how he has talents in improv that are directly related to those of towing the line at a marathon. Bob is the author of Sportsman's, a newly released novel about finding courage to step out of your comfort zone. Let's dig in. All right. So, hey, Bob, it's been a minute or two or 10, quite a bit.
Yeah.
How the hell are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. How about you?
I am doing fantastic. As good as, anybody could be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in Northwest Indiana, I see for a few days, joining us from the much sunnier, much warmer West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sunny and warm out there right now. It's been rainy. It's winter time, in California. So it fluctuates, but even when it's cold, it's in the 60s. So
yeah, well, I was gonna
so
say,
bad.
don't crush my illusion of beautiful weather on the West Coast. It's certainly not
Well,
Northwest Indiana weather.
It's not anything to complain about. You'll get like a week of rain, not 3 months of gloom and snow. So
yeah,
and you don't have to shovel anything. So
well, you got lucky without having. Yeah, I was gonna say you got lucky without having to come back here and have to trudge through that at all. So
yes, you never know when you're traveling this time of year what you're going to get. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so excited that you took a minute to join me today. I've known you for a long time, and we've ran together and coached together, and I've watched you perform improv, and I've enjoyed that so much and think that's so cool that you partake in that. That's something that I certainly find, I could never find myself on a stage doing improv like that.
Everybody says that. Says that.
I think it takes a certain kind, and I think it's cool that way. And I think it's cool that you teach other people how to become wired that way, to, rewire their brains to show up on stage like that. I think that's awesome. So you're not only doing that, but you're teaching it. Yeah. And then, other cool endeavors that you're doing, writing books.
Yeah. It's I think I just hit a time over the past, I'd say two-ish years, where I reconnected with, I think, who I really am. And I'm a creative person. And I think for a lot of my adult life, I pushed that away or ignored it or allowed myself to chase after the things that we're told are important, having money and having a big house and having your kids go to a certain school or whatever it is, whatever. It could be a million different things for everybody. But I got caught up in that for a long time, and I let go of the things that used to really get me excited when I was younger. I don't know if you can hear the motorcycle outside. Hopefully not. And because when I was a kid, and even when I first got married in the early 90s, I was pursuing improv. I was in Chicago. I was doing I was going to Second City. I was going to ImprovOlympic, and the people that were teaching me improv back then are now famous people like Adam McKay. An Academy Award-winning director. But back then he was just Adam McKay teaching improv on Belmont Street and at ImprovOlympic. The people that went on to create Upright Citizens Brigade and the UCB theaters in New York and LA, and They were just people teaching classes. I remember the first show I ever saw at Second City on the main stage was Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, Amy Sedaris, Paul Dinello. It's like unbelievable. I mean, and they were just, the main stage cast at Second City. They were not anybody famous, anyway, but I digress, I guess. But but I mean, I was right in the mix of that, in the midst of the Amy Poehlers and the Tina Feys. I mean, we were all in Chicago at the same time. We were all in this mix. And then I remember, and maybe I'm getting too much detail here, but I remember we had an improv company in Chicago. It was called Broad Shoulders Productions. We had our own theater. We loved it. We'd written some plays. And one day we were a for-profit company, so we were all on our board of directors. So we'd have these board of directors meetings, and we're sitting at the dining room table in my apartment in Chicago. And one of the guys, Chip, looks at everybody and goes, "I think we should all move to Los Angeles as a group." And my wife and I had just started looking for houses in Northwest Indiana. She was from Northwest Indiana, my ex-wife. And I was like, I can't go. And so they all moved to Los Angeles. Most of them moved out of Los Angeles eventually, but they went for it then. And I went in a different path. And I went toward writing. And I was successful at writing. I was making a living as a freelancer. And then I got a job in downtown Chicago, and I was, managing editor of a business to business magazine and all those things. And then I can hear this motorcycle anyway. And then I was, the magazine I was the editor for was, a magazine that covered commercial real estate in 10 states in the Midwest. And I was talking to and covering all these commercial real estate guys. And this is the early 90s or early 2000s, I'm sorry. And they're making so much money. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm on the wrong side of this thing. So I quit and got a job being a commercial real estate salesperson. And the very first day, I mean, within 2 hours of my first day there, I'm like, oh, this is not good. This is, I have made it in the famous words of Arrested Development. I've made a huge mistake. But I didn't admit it to myself. I was just like, nope, you got to suck it up, and you got to, and that led me on the path to sales for, from that was 2005 until really 2021, so for that period of time, I gave up the dream that I could make a living and live in a creative way. I did some side things, I did like disposable theater, but I never took that seriously as anything that would get anywhere, because we were in Northwest Indiana. I was just like, well, nobody's going to discover somebody in Northwest Indiana. You got to go to Chicago or LA or New York. And so, but in March, end of February of 2021, my girlfriend at the time and I split up. And my initial reaction was to run back to the Midwest. Like, oh, I should just go back to, Chicago or the Midwest or Northwest Indiana or whatever. And I thought about it that night, and I thought, I think I'm out here for a reason. I didn't know what it was. So I got an apartment in Seal Beach, which was my favorite apartment in my entire life, which I just moved out of a couple months ago. And then 2 weeks later, my job let me go. And, at a different point in my life, I might have just been like, oh my God, the world is coming to an end, and neither one of those events fazed me at all. It was just like, it was almost like, I had a chain around each leg, not that I had a bad relationship with my girlfriend or anything like that. I don't mean it like that, but it was like, I was freed from other people's expectations when she and I split up. And then the other chain was taken off when my when my company let me go, and I was like, I can do anything I want. I've got, I have money in the bank. I've got, yeah. And it just, I just slowly started reopening back up. And I'd written the first draft of what became my novel, Sportsman's, right at the beginning of the pandemic. Like at the beginning of March of 2020, I had made a commitment that I was going to type 1 page a day for 100 days. And it had nothing to do with the pandemic. It just happened to coincide with the beginning of the pandemic. And I did that. So I had this rough draft for, a couple of years. And I played around with it, and I sent it off to some people, and I tried to, rework it. I'm all over the place, Sephoria. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. I'm glad that you're telling me what's, happened then where you are now. I'm enjoying hearing your story.
So that was part of the process. So it was rolling along with me as well. And then I found a running club out in Long Beach, and I started running with them in May of 2021. And that was great. I met a lot of people there, did a couch to 5K program for them. And then I stumbled across an improv theater in a town called Tustin, which I'd never heard of before, in Orange County, California. And they were having auditions in June of 2021. And so I went to audition, and I got cast. And over time, I just slowly started with my therapist and with the people I met through improv there, and with the proximity to Los Angeles and everything else, just slowly opening that door again to the person who wanted to create for a living. And I still don't know what exactly that looks like. Whether it will be writing, whether it will be voiceover, whether it will be acting, whether it will be acting in commercials, whether it'll be, I don't know what it looks like. And it could be all of those things too. That's the one thing I've realized in being around people in Los Angeles is, very few are just on one strict path. They're doing things in various ways. They're making money doing voiceover. They're making money teaching. They're making money, doing commercials, stuff like that. So that's where I'm at now. I've done some background stuff or extra work over the past year, which has been fun. So I've been, in the background on TV shows and things like that, which doesn't pay much. It pays minimum wage. But it's fun to be on, sets and things like that. And I'm currently taking classes at Groundlings in LA. I'm in the kind of the upper echelon classes of that right now. I don't know if there's a path there or not because of my age. Doing improv in LA, doing improv in Orange County on a very regular basis. I just finished NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, which some people know about, some people don't.
I saw your posts about it. I wasn't sure what it was, but that's cool now that you're bringing it up.
Yeah. You just, it's a volunteer thing. The first time I signed up for it was 2010. And this was the first year that I actually won, they call it winning. I wrote 55,000 words in 30 days. And the goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And so I have that novel, and then I have another novel that I kind of started that I didn't quite get done with last NaNoWriMo in 2021. So I've got 2 other novels, and I'm going to try and see if I can go through the traditional publishing way with those, and get an agent and a publisher. And I self-published the first one, but anyway, okay. So I've given you my backstory now, half hour of backstory.
I mean, one thing I think is really cool about you, and it's been true ever since I've known you, is that you don't have to necessarily see the whole picture in order just to take the first step, where so many of us really get hung up with needing the plan and needing to know what it's like in order to even start something. And I don't know if that comes from your improv mindsets, or what, but I think that is such an amazing trait that you possess, and it's clearly something that you're continuing to do now. You don't know what things are going to look like in regards to your next professional leap, but you're walking into it anyways, and that's cool, where most people would just go back to sales.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I have a couple of thoughts on that. One, it doesn't always work out. I mean, that impulsive, I'll call it impulsiveness.
Mhm.
That's the type of impulsiveness that also led me to walk away from writing and go into sales or try and do commercial real estate. Oh, I'm going to do this. And I've kind of always been like that. And I'm sure it's driven some people crazy. But I think the difference between like, I think the difference over time is that, like, if I compared like being in Chicago in the mid 90s and doing improv, I was so fixated on the end goal. I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, and I was like that. I mean, I didn't, and it couldn't happen fast enough. And because I was so fixated on the end goal and not in enjoying the ride, it ruined the ride, and it led me to feel dissatisfied that it wasn't happening fast enough. Oh my gosh, this is never going to happen. Watching other people gain success was not like, that's great. There's enough success in the universe for everybody. It was more like, oh, that bastard, he's, somebody's brother or whatever. And I think, to me, that's the big difference between then and now, is now I can enjoy where I am. I still want to get places, but I'm not as hyper focused on the end goal as much as like the journey of it. And it's like running, people are like, I'm going to run a marathon, or I could never run a marathon. Well, if you say you can never run a marathon, well, you can never run a marathon. I'm sorry. It's like, yes, you can't. But if you're like, I want to run a marathon, eventually you reach a point where you realize, oh my gosh, I am going to do this. That 20-mile run, you see the light bulb go on so many people's eyes. It's like, wow, I can do this. I am going to finish this. But if your goal from, I don't know, day one is my first marathon and I'm going to qualify for Boston, or I'm going to, do something crazy, or I'm going to lose 100 pounds by training for a marathon, or I don't know, if you're fixated on something other than that day's scheduled run, you can ruin the whole process. And that's where I think I've changed over the years. And I've kind of got a theory that depending on where you are in life, when you're in your 20s, I think everybody in their 20s is searching, but I also think that they think they have to have it all figured out already. To a certain extent, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to make it. And I see this with my kids, that I think they feel like they have to make a decision and they can never change from that decision. It's like, I'm going to do whatever. And then you can never change. And I'm like, I've changed so many times. I don't know. And then in your 30s and maybe into your 40s, I think there's this feeling that you can make the universe do what you want it to do. You can get the universe in a headlock and make it so that I make, $500,000 a year, or I'm the best salesperson, or I'm the, whatever it is, whatever your goal is, that you somehow can twist the the forces of creation to your bidding. And I think that leads a lot of people to dissatisfaction and frustration. And then I think when you get into your 50s, some people refuse to change. Some people are still caught, and I think they become more bitter and more bitter and more bitter, because they're like, the universe is against me, as opposed to surrendering to the whatever the flow or path is. And I think that's kind of what's happened to me in the past 2 or 3 years, is I've just surrendered to what feels good? That's kind of my mantra. Does this feel good? Does this bring me joy? Does this, I don't want to use the word happy, because happy is kind of like a word like success or failure. It just has some, it has different connotations to different people. But, does this bring me joy? Do I feel good doing this? And I had a motto for a while. It's kind of an improv motto that some other people have had, which is follow the fun. Is this fun? Am I having fun? And, if I'm not having fun, why am I doing it? And depending on where you are in that curve that I just talked about, that can sound insane. Like, no, fun is fun is a byproduct of quote unquote societal success, of, having a lot of money, having a big house, having a fancy car, and I think, more and more it's clear, when you talk to people who are super successful, that success is not what brought them happiness. It brought them to a realization that they don't need those things to be happy eventually.
Because by success, you're talking financial wealth is what you would refer to as that.
Yeah, I think, and that's not my definition. That's,
right.
That's society's definition, or America's definition of success.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
I can see so many sides of that. The different, I guess, positions in life that people find themselves at. I have somebody in my life that adamantly believes that we're not here to be happy. We're not here to be joyful. You're here to serve a purpose. And if that purpose sucks, then, well, that sucks for you, but that's life. So that's one like far end of that. And then the other side of that is people that are on the way opposite end of that belief, and they go towards what is warm and what is joyful. And it has nothing to do perhaps with financial gain in any way. It's just about how they can enjoy life and maybe even contribute to and be purposeful in life, regardless of what it has to do with any type of financial wealth, right? So it's like one extreme to the next in regards to beliefs. I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah. And I think most people are. I think, there's definitely, if you go back to, it's just our culture. There's this, my mom's family is from the East Coast, and they're like, they didn't come on the Mayflower, but like the second boat, the one after that. And they have this really waspy attitude about the world, just like you said, your friend, it's like, don't get too happy, because when you're happy, the other shoe's going to drop, something bad's going to happen. Don't enjoy life, just there's that stoicism of like, just keep a stiff upper lip and suck it up, and and that's just I don't know, it drives me crazy, because and it's in me, and I fight against it, sometimes, and I have to avoid people who have that attitude sometimes, because I will get sucked into it, because it's so ingrained. But how old's your son?
8.
So he's still at that. You can't tell me that, that what he thinks at 8 years old is that I need to be, stoic, and, he's like, joy. What's fun? What do I want to do? I want to play a video game. I want to do karate or whatever. I want to go ride my bike. I want to try this. I want to try that. Oh, this looks fun. That looks fun. I want to play soccer. I want to do this. And, and some people, that drives them crazy because their kids bouncing all over the place. But that's what, that's what life's about, trying new things and exploring new things. It's not about having, the same haircut and pleated jeans from 1990 and, being the same person, and being afraid of change. And people get, especially in America, people as adults get settled into these places, and whether it's, they get settled into a role, and they, their role is businessman or father or mother or caretaker or loser or failure or whatever, and they have this story that they've associated with for so long, and they think that they can't change it. And I just don't believe that. I believe that, if it takes courage, and it takes stepping out of your comfort zone, but God, it's so much better to live happily, and live joyously than it is to suffer. And when you and I were running together a lot, that was between like 2010 and 2013. And that was in the time when I was going between my marriage was ending that entire time. I mean, it had started in 2010, the end of it, and we finally got legally divorced in 2013. And I look back at those 3 years, and it seemed like those 3 years were 100 years long. I mean, everything felt like it was crashing down, but I wouldn't trade it. I mean, it took me another, almost 10 years, to get completely out of that. But I just look at where I was then, and the mental anguish that I was going through, trying to figure out who I was all over again. And I thought I figured it out a few times, and wouldn't be surprised if 2 years from now we could talk and I would be like, yeah, I thought I had it figured out in 2022, and I didn't. And I wouldn't be surprised if I'm on what would appear to some people to be a different path. But I really feel that the creativity is my path, and is my journey, and is where I want to be. And what form that takes, I think the universe will decide. But I just have to keep moving forward with small steps in all toward what I want, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah.
So,
reinventing oneself and evolving is something that is necessary, and so many people, I feel like, resist that because of the programming, the ingraining that you have growing up in the society that we live in, that it's however you were taught to believe it, being in this lane instead of in that lane type of mentality. And a lot of us do end up switching lanes multiple times in life. And I honestly feel bad for people that don't. People that just stay the course, people that say, I haven't changed since I was in high school, and they're like 50 or 60. It's like, oh my God, really? I feel so sorry for you. I'm so sorry that you haven't grown and evolved and learned anything. Cause I just feel like you're stuck in this lane of just mundane routine existence, not
there's
living.
There's that great Muhammad Ali quote that, if a man thinks the same at 50 as he did at 20, he's wasted 30 years of his life.
Exactly.
If have you not learned anything?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like that quote too. It's like growth is being willing to have your mind changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's so many things that, and I'm sure it resonates with you too, that you probably resisted believing or denied embracing 20 years ago versus now. And then it's like you look at things from a different perspective, or maybe put yourself in the shoes of somebody else or a different situation, and you're like, oh yeah, like I actually don't think that way anymore.
Yeah. It gives you a little more empathy toward people who are in that position at that younger stage of life. But it also makes me shake my head when they're like at the same stage or age in life, and I'm like, how can you still, and yeah. And there's a whole industry out there that makes money off of that whole thing too. A number of industries, but that's a whole nother topic. But
if we could live in reverse, if we could do the Benjamin Button thing where you live backwards with the knowledge of
Yeah.
a lifetime of influence, essentially. That would be cool, to be in your 20s knowing what you know
Oh
in
my
your
God. Yeah.
50s, 60s, 70s. How cool would that be?
Yeah. And that's a great thing to remember too. And I see that with my sons. It's like from time to time, I'm like, I get frustrated with them because I want them to be more open to things. And then I'll go back and I'll think about, okay, what was I doing when I was 22? What was I doing when I was 20? What was I fixated on? And okay, just to remember that that's part of growing up. You have to go through the stages, and you don't have to go through the societal expectation stages. You don't have to go through but for so many years, I thought money was the answer to everything, and I remember writing in journals in the 90s, like if I could just make this much money a year, and literally, I mean, I don't think I wrote these words, but something very close to it, all my troubles would be over. I would have no more further problems in life. Well, when, what's the saying, when you don't have any more problems, it's because you're dead. It's like life is just a series of challenges, and it's all how you, approach them, or allow them to affect you or react to them. Our reaction, or our, what's the word I'm looking for? Our response to anything is, we have a choice whether, it's like, okay, this is going to crush me. This is not going to crush me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people, it's part of the mythology of America, like he was a great guy till he lost everything, and then he became a shell of himself and horrible alcoholic and lived in the street. It's like if that's what you think is going to happen, then it's going to happen. But if it's like, oh, he hit rock bottom and he bounced back up, well, then that's what's going to happen. But I don't think you need to hit rock bottom. I think if you can open up your heart a little bit along the way and accept yourself for who you are. And I think that's where I do feel like a little bit Benjamin Button is. I feel like the more I follow what feels good, the more I feel like I'm at my essential self, the 8-year-old. What did I want to do when I was 8? I don't know, but I'm sure as hell wasn't selling, electronic equipment for a German manufacturer. I know that wasn't my number one goal. And that's why, like, writing, actually not writing, but publishing, actually taking the step to put that book out into the world was terrifying. I mean, that's what held me back for my entire life, was the fear of, what are people, they're going to say I suck. They're going to say this is terrible. And is it a perfect book? No, no, it's not. It's not perfect, but, and everybody doesn't like it. And I remember I was so excited when, I got the first few good reviews, and then there was somebody who just, like, they didn't like it. And I years ago, I think I would have been crushed. I would have just been like, oh no. But as I thought, there has not been one single creation in the history of mankind that everybody liked. There's not one song, there's not one book, there's not one, play or whatever that everybody likes. I mean, people are different, and for some it resonates, for some it doesn't. So there was a moment last summer, and nothing else really had changed. And I had the manuscript laying around, and a really close friend of mine read the first 25 pages, and she was like, this is really good. And for whatever reason, I finally heard it, and that was her opinion, but it was the right opinion at the right time. And from that point forward, the process was really easy. I mean, the editing process, and I'll tell you, that's the other part. Everybody talks about writing, like the process of writing. You read articles about how some famous author writes. The thing that nobody talks about is editing, rewriting it, editing it. Nobody talks about that part of it. And that is 99% of writing a novel. It's like going through it again, reading it and going, oh my God, no, that doesn't work. And reading it out loud to yourself and sending it off to somebody to do a line edit on it. And then getting to the point where it's just like, okay, I accept, it's good enough. It's as good as, I could continue to work on it again and again and again. There was one author, I can't remember who it was. It was a woman, an older woman author. And she said that when she would go in to record the audio versions of her books, she'd keep like changing the words because you're just like, oh, this is, she was like rewriting the book, and then they would stop her and say, no, you have to read it exactly as it's published. She's like, oh, okay. But it would be better.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because if you just keep going over it and over it and over it, it's never going to be done, right? But you're always going to find flaws, or what you think are flaws in your original work. And I can see how you could really get caught up with something like writing a book and it like never gets published because of that.
Yeah. And that's a way to hide in the fear of it too, to you protect yourself.
Right.
There's that one cartoonist, the Oatmeal. I'm sure I know you're familiar with him because he's the guy that came up with the blurch.
Okay.
The running blurch thing, remember,
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he has this like creative chart. It's like how a project goes from start to finish. And it's like, oh, I have an idea. And then it's like all these lines and dumpster fire and, all this stuff. And then the last one is, fuck it, it's good enough.
Yeah, seriously.
And every artist has to get to that point where, we would never have a song. Your favorite band would never record a song. They'd be constantly working on it. My gosh, go watch a couple of the episodes of Let It Be, the video or the movie that came out on not Apple, on Disney Plus or whatever, the re-edited version of all the footage of the Beatles, working on songs. And, it's like there's like hours and hours and days and days and days and days of them just sitting around, just talking about whatever. And then all of a sudden there's like Paul McCartney just starts doing something. And then, George Harrison's yawning. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, that sounds pretty good. And it turns into, like Get Back. It's just like started with, like him, dun, 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 it's like, and in 5 minutes, it's gone from nothing to this. And, it's like the angels, spoken, and that's the creative process. But to get to the point where you put it out, you have to eventually just say, and I don't know if we can do language like this, but just fuck it. You got it. You have to do that at some point. And it's the same with running. At some point you're like, I'm not going to look like, I'm not going to be a 5'2", 88-pound Kenyan. I'm just not. Never, no matter how much I run, no matter how much I don't eat, that's not going to be me. So if my fastest time is going to be this, if I care about time, then great. You and I both know people that you would never in a million years guess finished a marathon, if you looked at them physically. True. But they have finished it and they have done it. And that's a monumental achievement. And we also know people who, beginning runners that finish a 5K. And for them, that 3.2 miles is just as amazing as somebody else running 100-mile, trail race or whatever. It's just, it's all relative. And if you can let yourself experience that joy and that satisfaction of achievement, it's good enough. It's good enough. And that's great. No judgment. So
and what you're saying about, that mindset of, like, fuck it, it's done, just be done with it. That goes back to what you said earlier about just stepping into accepting and who you are and what it is, and rather than trying to maneuver into something else that isn't necessarily. I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah. And it has to do with improv as well. Improvisation, you're making up stuff on stage. It's never been seen before. It'll never be seen again. And that's, something after, I've been doing improv since I think 1992 on and off. There was about a 10-year period where I didn't do any, but, and you get to a point where you accept that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be uh, everything that you want it to be. Every scene cannot, and I always tell my students in improv, there's no such thing as a perfect improv show. And if there is, if you have a perfect improv show, be careful when you walk into the theater, because you're probably going to get hit by a bus. It just doesn't happen. So you get used to that feeling of, I did the best I could. It was fun. We had fun. That's the bottom line. Did you have fun? Yeah. Okay. Did the audience have fun? Yeah. Okay. It was a good show then. But that takes years of working on improv as well to get to the point where you realize it's never going to be perfect. I know people who have taken classes from me and have done improv for a long time, and they still see improv as something that's solvable, like a math problem. And it's not. It's not. There's no 2 + 2 = 4. It's 2 + 2 = 21. Every night it's different because of what it is. But their brains just they have a super analytical brain, and they just think that if I can just figure out one part, this next part I can get, you can't. It's untamable. Same with running. I mean, I don't know how many marathons you've run, but I look back at mine, and I use this as my kind of comparison with the book too. It's like the first one, you don't know how to get from day one of training until to the end of the race. You just kind of okay, well, people have done this before, so I know it's possible, and you just kind of trust, right? And that was like the first book. The first book was like that. It's like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I kind of have a path, and I'm just going to follow it to the finish line. And again, accepting that it's not going to be perfect. And then your second marathon, it's like, okay, I know what to expect. No, you don't. You get up, you feel great. You had a great training. You get up and you're like, oh, my stomach's not doing good today. And you spend half the race in the porta potty, or you have the worst training, and you get up and it's, perfect temperature, and you just feel great for whatever reason. And it's just like, it was effortless. And, but you had the worst traiing. I mean, you just don't know. And that's what people, that's what they say, that's why they play the game. You see somebody like, Meb Keflashegi, or however exactly you pronounce his name. Like when he got the, what was it, third place, the bronze medal, or the whatever in the Olympics in London. Okay. And he talks about the race. He's like, oh, I started and I felt like crap. And I just was like, all right, just finish, just do your best and finish. And then he's like, well, about halfway through, I started feeling pretty good. And that's and they ended up, medaling. And it was like amazing. And it's just like, you can't give up on the journey at some point and just go, well, I'm always going to be this, because it's not true. It's just not true. If you want to be something or do something or have something, you can be, do, or have anything you want. And it's the way I progress now. And I don't know if you know who Martha Beck is, but she's a life coach and been very influential in the last 2 years of my life. But she has this concept called turtle steps. And it's basically, you have a goal. And if you just continue every day to do a little turtle step, no matter what it could be, say I want to get, like for me, I want to get an agent, a literary agent. So what do I need to do? I need to get the book to the point where it's pretty much complete. And then I need to start sending it out, and I need to send it out more, and I need to maybe follow up or whatever. But what can I do between now and that point? I can do little steps. I can research one literary agent a day for the next 90 days, and I'll have a list of 90 literary agents that I can send to. But it's just, it doesn't, in the big picture, it doesn't seem like much. But I had this kind of epiphany when I was writing the final draft of Sportsman's and getting it ready to publish it, is the turtle steps are not on level ground. It's like a teeter-totter. And you're turtle stepping up the hill of the teeter-totter, from the ground up, and it's difficult. But then at some point, you get the weight of the teeter-totter shifts, and now your turtle steps are going downhill because you've done all those hard turtle steps, and it gets easier. They're not bigger, they're not necessarily more important, but it's easier, and you get the momentum kind of carries you through. And that's how I felt with Sportsman's that last like month or two. It was just like all of a sudden I was going downhill instead of uphill. And it started with that one person's comment that I finally heard, yeah, this is good. You should do this. And it was, I don't, for whatever reason, I heard it that day. Because I know other people said it before, but for whatever reason, that
you
was
received it differently that day.
Yeah.
And, proving once again that the power of words are in fact powerful, because had somebody that day in that moment said to you, it's okay, it's all right, I guess, who knows what would have happened if I would have even read this book,
Right.
So Sportsman's, talk to me about, where the idea came from, how it manifested. And we've talked a lot about finding your brave to get it out here into the world to be enjoyed, right? But tell me about how it blossomed in you. Where did it come from?
Yeah. Like I said, in like end of February, early March, whatever that was of 2020, before the pandemic, I was just like, I've talked about writing a novel since I was a little kid. It's been a dream of mine, a goal of mine forever. I love reading. I love authors. I love the stories about authors. And maybe that's part of why it's so hard, because you put them on pedestals, like, oh, they're so creative. And yeah, they are, but that creativity is open to all of us. So I made the commitment to myself that I was going to type 1 page per day for 100 days. And I was just gonna, like, at the end, when I hit the end of the page, I was going to stop, put my computer away and go. So I did that. I don't have ideas when I started. I think the first line that I started with for Sportsman's was, I'm leaving this town. And I don't know if I came up with that on my own or whether that came from somebody else. Or that might not have actually been the first, that might have been like 3 or 4 days in that popped up, because I just started writing. And that whole story just came up. I mean, just came from the universe. I don't know how else to describe it. It just, and eventually it was like I clicked into a story, and then, the thing that gets discovered originally was in the main character's backyard. It wasn't in somebody else's yard. And it was like, whoa, that's too weird. And I think for a long time I had a problem with how random that was. And so over time I found a way to make it less directly random. And, it felt better the way it is in the book now. And the people, those are people that I think we're all products of where we grew up. And if people that just, like we were talking about, that just never changed. They're just stuck. And going back to my hometown and looking at the friends that still live there, and the differences between them kind of brought those characters up. And then I just imagined what it would be like to be there. How would I be different if I was still there? And it's really the writing process is a lot like improvisation. You're just making it up as you go along. You just have a lot more details to keep track of. And that's tough sometimes. And I think there's a couple of editorial errors in the book where it's like sequences get out of order, but you do the best you can. And, no one's thrown it at the wall because of it, I don't think so. But yes, so the process was, that was my first experience with getting something of that length written. And then between then and now, I've done it 2 or 3 other times. So it gets easier, and you start to believe, oh yeah, I can write this length. It's just like that marathon thing, the second marathon, it's different, but you can get there. And now, I fully intend to either self-publish or have these next 2 books published, hopefully in the next year or so. I think if I was going to self-publish them, I would say, yeah, they're both going to be self-published by March, but I think that's taking the easier road right now. It's going to be a harder road for me to find an agent and that agent to find a publisher. But I think that's what I want. I want to go the traditional publishing route. And so for some reason that will feel, that those other people's opinions, which shouldn't matter, will make me feel more like a real author than self-publishing. But it's not true. It's not true.
It's not true.
But I have to admit that to myself, that's why I want to do it.
Yeah.
And have the courage to try. And if they all say no, then they all say no. And then I can publish it myself and go, well, they all said no. So, whatever.
Well, it's cool that you can admit that fear to yourself, though, because I think that in and of itself, being able to admit what we're scared of is just something too that is different now from in your 20s, I guess, just the way that we evolve.
That's
as
totally
humans.
True. Yeah.
Well, I've said it before. I've always thought you were awesome and a cool guy, but now that you're an author, that just levels up your
Well,
cool game for sure. In my opinion, I thought it was a great read and I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to what's next in the world of books by Bob Bing Craig for sure.
Yeah, the next one's set in Northwest Indiana, so
okay,
the one I just finished, so that's cool. Oh, and then I just got accepted. I entered the Chicago Marathon lottery, and I got accepted. So I
saw that. That's awesome. So you know what? You just keep coming back to the area, even though you're trying to stay away. There keeps being reasons, whether you're writing about it or running here. Yeah, cool. I've always one day it's kind of like a lot of people, it's like one day I have aspirations to be included in the author club, so to speak. We'll see. Well, I find it super intimidating to write a
turtle
book.
steps, start a blog, start writing for yourself, start journaling, whatever, and see where it goes. But the turtle steps are the key, because you can't, what do they say? You can't edit a blank page. So
for sure. And, I've talked a lot about imposter syndrome before, in everything that I've done in life, even just starting this podcast, it's exactly what you've described, and other things in areas of your life where it's like, well, what are people going to think? Are they going to think it's dumb? Is anybody going to listen? But at the end of the day, it's not for everybody else. It is, but it isn't. It's like you want people to read it or listen to it and have it resonate and then gain something from it. But also it's a place to just connect with people like you and have a conversation. And if people listen to it, cool. But if not, I feel like we got something out of it.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't have to be a podcast or a book. For somebody, it might be, it might be running as their art, or painting or woodworking or their family or their house or their garden or whatever. If it brings you joy and you feel satisfaction from doing it, then that's what's important. It's not the, oh, I wrote a book, or a book was important to me, but it could have been something completely different. It could have been, like when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a professional basketball player. Which is hilarious, right?
Well, I don't want to say it's hilarious and crush that childhood dream, but I can't picture it.
Yeah, exactly. I never got taller and I never got better. And I played and played and played and played and played. And, looking back, I think the reason I never got better was because I never played against people better than me. I wouldn't purposely seek out the, that's where you grow, is through the challenge. And I never sought out challenges. And so, and maybe I just wasn't any good at it, but it's fine when you're a kid to 4th, 5th, 6th grade to have those dreams. got to have something to shoot for, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think you're making a lot of shots in life these days. I think it's really cool what you're doing. And I'm excited to just see your next projects.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on here, and you're doing awesome as well. Keep just going with whatever feels good. I know you've gone through, like, you had the restaurant, and then that kind of, morphed into something else, but you're still doing all that stuff, and you're also, you're championing what you believe in, veganism and love and happiness and running, and you see how you affect other people's lives, and you've affected so many people's lives, and I hope you know how much you have done that, and you can take that to heart and know that when you're doing that, it's your whatever soul shines through. So keep up the good work.
That's cool, Bob. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, get me all sappy over here. Tell us how to stay connected with you.
The easiest thing is I have a website. I think it's bobbingcraig.com. It's in the back of the book. But through that, you can find me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Sportsman's is available through every online thing. Or if you really want to support your local bookstore, you can go to them and ask them to order it, and they can order it. I would love for more people to read it. And more people to give me feedback on what they think about it. But it's available everywhere, either paperback or electronic version. And the next one hopefully will be out sometime in the next year, depending on who takes it on. So I'll give you my phone number, but I don't want people, I won't answer if I don't know the number anyway. So
yeah. So that's not going to work. We'll put all the contacts that are acceptable in the show notes. So for sure. So check that out, listeners. So ways to stay connected with Bob and support his writing, read his books, watch his journey, and look for awesome things to come.
Yep. And if you're ever out in Southern California, check me out. I'm at ImprovCity in Tustin pretty regularly. And hopefully by fall, I'll be at the Groundlings regularly as well. But that's a path that I don't have control over. I'm just taking the steps I can. So
isn't that true for all of life? All right, Bob, I will talk to you soon. Thanks for joining me today.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Take care.
So much of this conversation resonated with me. I love the part about how we respond to life and determine success differently based on where we are in it all. The different approaches are less like chapters and more like lessons in how to level up, while in some ways, and in the best ways, leveling down. Bob, if you're hearing me, just know that you're one of those people I truly love connecting with. Thank you for the gifts you left here today and for joining me on What's on Your Plate. To our audience, please support the amazing people that grace this space. All the ways to connect with Bob are in the show notes, as well as where to buy his amazing book. Show the love far and wide by sharing this episode. You can also choose to tangibly help support What's on Your Plate podcast with the link in the show notes that helps with the background costs. Thank you to our listeners. I appreciate you so much. And again, to Bob, thank you for sharing a piece of yourself here today. Much love, everyone. Until next time.